The gallery lights hit the photographs and everything becomes real. 8-foot walls covered in images of her face, 3 months of unguarded moments, thousands of photographs documenting falling in love. She stands in the center, surrounded by herself, seeing her truth through a photographer's obsessed eyes for the first time. Her sister arrives and immediately understands what this confession means. Margot waits across the room, watching. The photographs are undeniable. The love is undeniable. The only question is whether love can survive this kind of exposure, this completely documented, this utterly visible to the world. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. Tell us where you are watching from and subscribe. The studio was in the warehouse district, the kind of space that required your knees to warn you before your eyes did. 5,000 square feet of polished concrete, roll-up doors on 2 sides, and enough light rigging to make someone's neck hurt just looking at it. Margot Vess had owned the space for 6 years. In that time, she had photographed 3 mayors, 2 Olympic athletes, and 1 member of parliament who had later sued her over unflattering angles, which had only increased her reputation. I knew this because Sienna would not stop talking about Margot Vess. My sister was 31 years old. She was a commercial real estate broker with the particular confidence that comes from moving large amounts of money through other people's ambition. She was good-looking in a very specific, very intentional way, the kind of beauty that had been managed and maintained like a professional asset for so long it had become hard to tell the management from the thing itself. She was doing a feature for a downtown magazine, the kind of lifestyle thing that paired commercial portraits with a 3,000-word interview about the architecture of ambition and how she had learned to move through the city like she owned it. The photographer they had originally hired was named Derek. Derek got food poisoning the day before the shoot, and Sienna had, with the particular fury of someone used to having things work the way she wanted them to, called the magazine and demanded Margot Vess instead. Margot had turned her down. Sienna called back and offered more money. Margot still refused. Finally, on the day before the shoot, Margot's assistant had called and said Margot would do it, but only if the client understood that Margot was not a photographer who made things flattering. She was a photographer who made things true. Sienna had agreed. Then she had gotten a call from the magazine saying they needed additional portrait options, something more candid, something showing Sienna at work in an office setting, and Sienna had realized she had exactly one dress that worked for both the studio concept and the office location, and the wardrobe change window didn't leave time for a fitting session. So she had called me. I was Sienna's younger sister by 4 years. I was 5'9" and had been told more than once that I moved through space the way tall people do when they have spent their whole lives apologizing for it, which was not quite fair and not quite wrong. I worked in museum curation, which was the kind of job that required you to sound smart at evening events, and was deeply satisfied by very small amounts of actual money. I had borrowed approximately $200 worth of clothes from my sister over the years, and had never seen her even slightly bothered about it, because $200 was less than a dinner party cost her to host. The studio smell hit me first: warm dust, studio lights, whatever chemical thing high-end photography required to keep the equipment functioning. There was music playing through invisible speakers, something ambient and structurally designed not to interfere with conversation. Margot Vess was at the far end of the space, which was so large it took a moment to understand she was actually there and not just an architectural feature of the lighting design. She was 38 years old. This I knew because Sienna had mentioned it approximately 5,000 times while preparing for this shoot. She had been born in New York, trained in London, built her reputation in Berlin, and had moved to the city 3 years ago for reasons that the several articles written about her never quite explained. The photographs were the explanation. You looked at a Margot Vess photograph and you understood that she was not interested in making anyone look good. She was interested in making truth visible, which was sometimes the same thing and sometimes not. She was wearing dark pants and a linen shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbow. Her hair was short and had the specific quality of having been cut by someone who understood that her face did not need styling, only framing. She had the posture of someone who stood at cameras all day and had learned to use her body as a tool rather than as a thing to be displayed. When she looked up from her equipment, and saw me standing in the doorway. Something in her expression shifted. Not warmth. Margot Vess was not a woman who trafficked in warmth. Recognition. Like she had been expecting something and I was it, and the surprise was that I was arriving exactly on time. "Where is your sister?" she asked. "Running late," I said. "Hair emergency." She asked if I could come stand for the lighting tests. "Make sure the setup works for both of us." "The setup works," Margot said. "It will work for whoever steps in front of the camera." "I know," I said. But she wanted to make sure. A small pause. Margot set down the light meter she had been holding. "You are her sister," she said. Not a question. "I am," I said. "You look different," she said. That was accurate. Sienna was sharp-featured and carefully blonde, and had the kind of presence that made rooms reorganize themselves. I was dark-haired and soft-featured in a way that made people often forget I had been in the room with them. We shared the height and the bone structure and the way we moved, but the resemblance was the way photographs sometimes resemble things technically correct but missing the point. "I know," I said. "Come stand on the mark," Margot said. The shoot space was organized into a conversation of light. There was the key light at 45 degrees, precise and clean. There was fill light from the other side, carefully measured to suggest depth without creating shadow. There was a backlight just strong enough to separate Sienna from the background without reading as intentional. It was, I understood immediately, the kind of lighting setup that would make truth visible in a way that most people spent their professional lives learning to avoid. I was wearing dark jeans and a gray sweater and shoes I had borrowed from my sister that morning because the studio was large enough to make casual footwear a professional disaster. Sienna's dress was hanging on the rack to the left, a perfect cream-colored thing that had probably cost more than my rent. The mark was taped on the floor in the center of the lighting setup, the point where all the careful measurement converged. I stepped into it. Margot moved behind the camera. She was silent for a long moment, looking through the viewfinder, adjusting something on the body of the camera. Then she adjusted the key light slightly, maybe 2 inches. Then the fill light, maybe an inch in the other direction. Then she looked up. "Turn your head to the left," she said. I did. "Look down," she said. I did. "Now look at the camera," she said. "And don't think about looking at the camera. Look at me instead. Pretend I said something surprising." I looked at her. She was looking at me through the viewfinder. In the space between us, I could feel the weight of all the light, all the careful measurement of shadow and illumination, all the geometry designed to make truth visible. Something in my chest shifted. Click. She took the photograph like it was the only thing that had ever mattered. She took 37 more. Each one was a small instruction. Turn, tilt, breathe, look left, look here, think about something that cost you. The instructions were precise and required exactly nothing from me except that I follow them. But the way she was looking at me between each instruction, the way she was adjusting the lights, not for Sienna but for me, the specific quality of her attention, it was not the attention you pay to a placeholder. It was the attention you pay to the thing you actually wanted to see. At the 40-minute mark, Margot stepped back. "Dress fitting," she said. I came off the mark and changed in the small green room at the edge of the studio. Sienna's dress was cool silk against my skin and probably cost more than my annual museum salary. It fit, which was surprising. It fit well, which was more surprising. It fit like it had been made for me, which was impossible, because everything that belonged to Sienna was made for Sienna, was calibrated to her exact specifications, was designed to make her the clearest version of what she wanted to be. But it fit. I came back out. Margot was adjusting the backlight. She had shifted something about the setup. The key light was now slightly different. The fill had moved an inch. Everything was the same, and nothing was the same. She saw me in the dress and went very still. "Iris," she said. "Is that your name?" "Yes," I said. "Step back onto the mark," she said. I did. The second shoot was different from the first. In the first one, Margot had been testing the setup, testing the light, testing something technical that I had understood in the moment as testing me. In the second one, she was building something. Each instruction was the next step in a structure that required the one before it. Turn, and your collarbone catches the light. Look down, and the dress falls exactly like that. Look up, and your eyes find the camera with that exact amount of surprise. She moved around me, adjusting light, adjusting angles. Once she came close enough to adjust the dress collar, and her hand brushed my shoulder, and I felt it like it was the most significant thing that had happened to me all year. Turn slightly, she said. More. That's right. Click, click, click. The camera sounded like a heartbeat. Regular, inevitable, counting something. We shot for 2 hours. Sienna called at 1 hour 45 and said she was running another 45 minutes late. The hair emergency had spiraled into something involving the hairdresser's personal crisis and Sienna's natural instinct to solve other people's problems with money and authority. Margot took the call from me, listened without expression, and said that Iris could do the rest of the shoot, and if Sienna wanted to do a separate office setting, she could schedule that for tomorrow. Iris can do the rest of the shoot, she had said, not because she was a backup, because she was the right choice. By the end, the second shooting had become its own thing entirely. It was not a test anymore. It was not a technical exercise. It was Margot behind the camera, and me in the center of all that light, and a language developing between us that had nothing to do with photography, and everything to do with the fact that she was looking at me with complete and undivided attention, and I was not looking away. When the light started to fail, Margot stepped back from the camera. That's the end, she said. Okay, I said. I did not move off the mark. She came around the camera and looked at me across the distance of the studio floor. In the late afternoon light that was spilling through the high windows, light that was not part of the setup, not calibrated or measured, her face was entirely readable. Whatever she had been managing behind the camera setup, whatever she had kept contained in the grammar of technical instructions, was right there on the surface. She looked at me like she could not quite believe I was real. Then, she looked away. You should change, she said. I changed. When I came back out, Margot was already packing the camera equipment with the focused efficiency of someone who needed to be doing something with her hands. She did not look up. Tell your sister I'll send the files by tomorrow morning, she said. I'll need her to do a separate shoot for the office setting. Okay, I said. And Iris, she said. Yes. She looked at me for one long second. You do not need to stand in for someone else, she said. You are not a placeholder. I didn't know what to say to that. She looked away again. I'll call you about the office setting, she said. She called me. Not Sienna, me. She called my phone at 9 o'clock that night and asked if I was available tomorrow morning at 7. Sienna had other commitments, but the office setting needed an additional body for the shot, someone in the frame who could serve as counterpoint to the subject. It was a technical choice, she said. A compositional one. I said yes before she finished the sentence. I came back to the studio the next morning. Margot was already there, setting up in a different space that I had not known existed on the far side of the warehouse. This one was arranged like an office, but arranged like someone who had never worked in an office had arranged it. The desk was beautiful and empty. The lighting was harsh in a way that suggested complications. The wall behind the desk was neutral gray, and looked like it could contain an entire person or consume them. Margot was dressed differently today. Still dark pants, still the linen shirt. But today it was tucked in. And today she had styled her hair. And today there was something carefully controlled in the way she was arranging the equipment. I expected her to ignore me in the professional way that photographers do, to give me the technical instructions and call me back in the frame when Sienna arrived, and generally treat me like the technical necessity I was. Instead, she said, I would like to shoot you first. Sienna is not here yet, I said. I know, Margot said. Why would you shoot me first? She looked at me across the office space. Because I want to see what the light does to you in this context, she said. Because I want to know if the truth in harsh light is different than the truth in carefully calibrated light. Because I want to understand what you look like when you are not thinking about being looked at. I did not move. You don't have to, she said. The technical setup would work either way. I stepped onto the mark. This light was nothing like yesterday. This light was confrontational and unforgiving. This light did not soften or suggest. It showed everything, every small uncertainty on my face, every way my body was holding itself, every moment I was aware of being watched. "Look at the camera," Margot said. I did. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "That you should have asked me that before you started shooting," I said. "What are you thinking about?" she asked again. "That you're standing on the other side of a camera, and I'm standing in a field of light, and you are asking me to be honest in a space that's designed to make honesty visible," I said. She moved around the camera. Click. The shutter closed on the image. I had not been ready for that one. I had been thinking about her, thinking about me. Margot looked at the back of the camera. "There," she said quietly. "There it is." She shot for 30 minutes. No instructions, just questions. "What are you afraid of? Why are you here? What would you do if no one was looking? What would you do if I was looking?" Each question was a small confrontation. Each question required truth in the harsh light. And with each question, I understood that she was not asking me about the shoot. She was asking me about her. By the time Sienna arrived at 7:45, Margot had used an entire card of film on me. "Thousands of photographs," she told Sienna, "but only one or two that caught anything worth catching." That was normal. The ratio of attempt to success in photography was roughly the same as the ratio of approach to reciprocation in anything else. Sometimes you had to try 1,000 times to get one moment of real return. Sienna didn't understand what she was talking about. Margot photographed Sienna for 40 minutes. It was brilliant work. Sienna looked more powerful than she had ever looked. The light made her look like something that should not be questioned. But Margot's attention was different. She photographed Sienna like a professional, photographs a professional. The work was exemplary, the relationship was not. When the shoot was over, Margot told Sienna she would have 2 contact sheets by the end of the week, and that Sienna should select which images to provide the magazine. A typical professional arrangement. Professional distance maintained. But then Sienna left, and the studio was quiet again. Margot was breaking down the office setup, dismantling the light, putting things away with the methodical precision of someone trying very hard not to be in the room with me. "I should help," I said. "You should go," she said. "Your sister is waiting for her portraits." "She is not waiting. She is at work. She is waiting for a file." Margot set down the light stand. "Then go do whatever you do when you're not here," she said. "Go curate a museum or write an essay or think about your life." "I'm thinking about my life right now," I said. "Don't," she said. "It's not fair." "To who?" "To me," she said. "Because I am your sister's photographer, and you are your sister's sister, and this is the kind of thing that people regret, and I would prefer not to be the regret." "Okay," I said. "Okay means you're going to leave," she said. "Okay means I understand why you're asking," I said. But I'm not going to leave," I said. "Because that was fair to me, not you. I came here yesterday, and you looked at me like I was the thing you actually wanted to see, and I spent the night thinking about nothing else. You called me this morning at 9 o'clock, specifically to get me here alone, and you shot me in harsh light asking me what I was thinking about. You want fair. I want to know what happens next." Margot looked at me. "What happens next is I recommend you to other photographers in the city, and you build a modeling portfolio, and you have a career that doesn't involve standing in for anyone," she said. "That is the most professional thing you have said in the last hour," I said. "It's the most honest thing I've said," she said. "I don't think it is." She looked away. "This is complicated," she said. "Your sister is my client. My sister doesn't know that you're interested in me. My sister doesn't know that you kept me here yesterday an hour longer than you needed to. My sister doesn't know that you called me this morning specifically. My sister doesn't need to know any of those things. She's not going to be okay with it. She doesn't get to be okay or not okay with it. It's not about her. You're her sister. I'm my own person who is standing in your studio telling you that I knew exactly what you were doing, and I knew exactly what I was doing. And I am not going to stand here and pretend that I came back to the studio at 7 in the morning for any reason except that you asked me to." Margot looked at me. "I can't do this right now," she said. "I can't be this person right now." "When can you be this person?" At a time when you're not my client's sister." At a time when you've had more than one day to think about whether this is what you actually want, or whether it's just the attention of someone who knows how to direct attention. Okay, I said. I'll call you, she said. Don't call me. Don't message me. Don't create a record that I would have to explain to Sienna if she found it. Just exist for a few weeks and let me exist separately from you. And then we can talk about this in a way that doesn't hurt people. So that means we're not talking about this right now? It means I'm asking you not to make me more complicated than I already am. I didn't make you anything, I said. You made yourself the moment you looked through the viewfinder yesterday and saw something you wanted. She looked at me. For 1 second, just 1 second, the composure cracked, and I saw the person underneath it, the person who wanted this, who was terrified by wanting it, who was trying very hard to be the professional, and failing. Then she put it back together. Leave, she said quietly. Please. I left. But not before I saw her turn back to the camera and look at the photograph of me that she had taken when I was thinking about her thinking about me. She looked at it for a long time, like it was the only thing in the room worth seeing. Like it cost her something to look away. Sienna sent me the proofs 3 days later with the subject line, "Minimal edits needed." I looked through them. Margot was right. The office setup had caught something. Sienna looked powerful and expensive, and exactly like what she had always been. But the first contact sheet, the one that had been shot before Sienna arrived, was what I looked at for an hour. Photograph after photograph of my face in harsh light, thinking about her. Every frame, a moment where she had caught me being honest. Every frame, a moment where honesty looked like longing. I did not call her. She did not call me. 1 week passed. 2 weeks. Sienna received the final portfolio and sent Margot a check and wrote her a 5-star review online. The Downtown magazine published the feature with 6 of the photographs, all from the office setting, all of Sienna looking like the best version of herself. Nobody looking at the magazine would know that there had been 800 photographs taken of someone else. Nobody would know that the best photographs were ones that never made it to print. At the 2-week mark, I was at the museum late, working on the lighting for a new installation of contemporary photography, which felt like the most ironic possible universe when my phone buzzed with a text from a number I did not have saved. The gallery on 5th is showing a new collection. I am going tomorrow night at 8. If you would like to be there, I would like that. I stared at the message. She had waited exactly 14 days, long enough that any record of the previous shoot would have been archived, long enough that the professional obligation to Sienna was sufficiently distant, long enough that I would have had time to think about whether I actually wanted this, or whether I had just been caught in the attention of someone who knew how to direct it. I had thought about little else. I wrote back. What time should I arrive? 8, she wrote. Or early. Arrive early if you want. I will be there. I arrived at 7:45. The gallery was in the Arts District, a long white space with wooden floors that made every footstep sound like intention. The photographs on the walls were large and mostly architectural, spaces captured in the moment of maximum light. Margot was standing in front of a photograph of a warehouse interior, which was where the irony landed and stayed. She was wearing dark pants and a dress shirt, and she had taken care with her appearance in a way she had not at the studio. She looked like she had spent the afternoon thinking about what to wear to this moment. When she turned and saw me, she did not smile. I'm glad you came, she said. I almost didn't, I said. Why? Because this feels like another test. And I'm not sure I want to be tested anymore. It's not a test, she said. It's an ask. I'm asking you if you still want this, knowing that it's going to be complicated, knowing that it's going to be difficult with your sister, knowing that the attention I'm paying you is not the kind that fades quickly or easily. I'm asking if you understand what you're saying yes to. I'm not sure there's a way to understand that until you're already inside it, I said. She looked at me. You're right, she said. She took my hand. It was the first time she had touched me, not as a photographer arranging a subject, but as a person. Her hand was warm and steady, and it held mine like it was the most important thing in the world. We stood in front of the warehouse photograph for a long time. Tomorrow, she said, I am going to call your sister and tell her that I cannot work with her professionally anymore due to a personal conflict. You don't have to do that, I said. I want to do it. I don't want to have to hide this. I don't want you to have to hide this. I don't want to text you in secret and call you when I'm certain she won't know. I want to be able to say your name and have it mean what I want it to mean. She will be angry, I said. I know, she said, and that is her right. And I will accept the consequences of what I've done, which is fall in love with the wrong person at the wrong time in a situation that was entirely my fault to maintain professionally. So, you're in love with me? I have been since yesterday at 4:45, she said. When you turned slightly on the mark and the light hit your face and you looked like someone who was thinking about being seen. Since before that, probably. From the moment you stepped out of the green room in your sister's dress and I understood that you were not a placeholder. I have been in love with you since then, and I have been managing it like a professional manages something they know they shouldn't feel, which is badly and with an enormous amount of control. And now? Now I'm tired, she said. I'm tired of controlling it. I'm tired of managing you like you're a professional obligation. I want to give you real attention, not photographer's attention. I want to know you in a context that's not studio lighting and professional pretense. Okay, I said. Okay means yes? Okay means, I'm standing in a gallery, looking at a photograph of a warehouse, and you are holding my hand, and I am no longer a placeholder, or a test, or a composition. I'm just someone you want to see. She looked at the photograph. Do you know who took this? She asked. No, I said. I did, she said. 3 years ago, before I moved here. It's the first time I understood that I could use light to show what was actually there instead of what should be there. It's my best work. And I have spent 6 weeks looking at the contact sheets and trying to figure out why it's never felt like enough. And then yesterday, I realized it's because you were missing. I'm in there? Not in the photograph. In the understanding of why I took it, I was looking for someone I hadn't met yet. I was photographing the space where you were going to stand. That's incredibly romantic and also incredibly strange, I said. She almost smiled. That's probably accurate, she said. The gallery closed at 9. We walked out into the night and into a city that felt suddenly very small and very possible. She took me to a restaurant that required reservations weeks in advance, but managed to seat us anyway, which I understood was the power of being someone whose work people recognized and wanted to make accommodations for. We ate dinner and talked about everything except photography, which was clearly a deliberate choice. She asked me about the museum work, and about my childhood, and about the specific moment I realized that Sienna was going to be difficult to grow up alongside. I asked her about New York and London and Berlin, and about the specific moment she realized that cities could teach you how to see light. By the end of dinner, I understood that she was going to call Sienna in the morning and was going to lose a client and possibly gain a complicated family situation, and she was doing it anyway because she had decided that I was worth the cost. She walked me home. Outside my apartment, she stood with her hands in her pockets and looked at me with the full force of her attention. I'm going to kiss you, she said. And then I'm going to go call your sister and tell her the truth. And then you should probably prepare for her to be angry. But I needed you to know that I am choosing this. I am choosing you. I am choosing to stop managing this feeling and start existing inside it instead. Okay, I said. She kissed me. It was patient and careful and entirely sure. It was not the kiss of someone testing something. It was the kiss of someone who had been looking at me through light and shadow for 2 days and had finally found the one moment where the light was right. When she pulled back, I could feel the print of her attention, the weight of her seeing me, the specific gravity of being looked at by someone who knew how to make truth visible. Tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow, I agreed. She called Sienna at 8:30 the next morning. I was at the museum, pretending to work, when my sister called screaming that Margot Vess had just told her that she could not photograph her anymore due to a personal conflict. And what did I know about that? And why was Margot asking about my availability? And what exactly was happening? I told her. Sienna called me back at 7 that night and said, very carefully, that she was not happy about this, and that I had blindsided her, and that this was going to create a very uncomfortable situation professionally, and that she was going to need time to process. And that she loved me, and that I needed to understand the specific complications I had created. I told her I understood. She said, "Come to dinner this weekend. Bring her if you want. But we need to figure out how to exist as a family again." Margot and I went to dinner at Sienna's house on Saturday. It was tense and awkward, and Sienna was cold in the way that Sienna could be cold, which was not angry but was certainly not warm. But halfway through the meal, Margot said something about the light in Sienna's dining room, and Sienna made a joke and something shifted. Not resolution, not immediate forgiveness, but the beginning of the possibility that these three people could exist in the same room without the weight of it destroying everything. By the end of the evening, Sienna was asking Margot if she would consider doing some architectural photography for her commercial real estate firm, and Margot was considering it, and I was watching the two of them negotiate a new professional arrangement that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with them discovering that they liked each other's work. After dinner, Margot drove me back to my apartment. She parked outside and turned off the engine and looked at me in the dark of the car. "Your sister still hates me a little bit," she said. "Your sister respects you," I said. "That's not the same thing as liking you, but it's how Sienna begins. She respects your work. She's going to come around." Margot reached over and took my hand. "I would like to photograph you again," she said. "But not professionally, not as a portfolio piece or a technical test. I want to photograph you in a space that is not designed. I want to photograph you in the light of an actual moment. I want to understand you without the setup." "Okay," I said. "I am going to build an entire body of work of you," she said. "By the time I'm done, the world is going to know every version of your truth." "That sounds like a lot of photographs," I said. "It will be," she said. "It might take years." "That sounds like a commitment," I said. "It is," she said. "If you want it to be." "I want it," I said. She kissed me again, and this time it was not careful. It was the kiss of someone who had waited long enough and had decided that the waiting was over. Over the following 3 months, Margot began a project she called The Study. It was not a portfolio. It was not professional work. It was something else entirely, a chronicle of me existing in the spaces where I lived, moving through light, thinking about being seen, and learning not to perform that thinking. She photographed me at the museum, at dawn, before the staff arrived, when the light came through the skylights like it was arriving from somewhere else entirely. She photographed me in my apartment, sunlight on my face while I was reading something that had nothing to do with her. She photographed me at markets, and in restaurants, and on the street walking to work. Moments so small they should not have been worth documenting, and yet somehow, with her behind the camera, they became the most important moments I had ever lived. She never asked me to pose. She never directed me toward light or away from shadow. She simply watched and waited until the moment arrived, and then she captured it the moment when I was being myself completely, not aware that I was being seen, not thinking about my face or my body or the way my hands moved through space. 3 months of this. 3 months of finding her in new places when I thought I was alone. 3 months of learning to recognize the specific quality of attention that meant she was watching through a lens. 3 months of having my truth documented in ways that made me understand something about myself that I had not known before, that there was a version of me that existed in real time, unguarded, that was more beautiful than the versions I had been curating for years. By September, I had begun to look for her. I would be in my apartment reading and would sense her arrival before she ever came through the door. I would be at the museum and would know, without turning around, the exact moment she entered, because the light would feel different, like it was being witnessed by someone who understood how to see. She was becoming the constant in my days, the person I was performing being unseen for, the obsession I was allowing to unfold without stopping it. One night, she came to my apartment and I asked her not to bring the camera. She came anyway with her hands empty and her face unguarded, and we sat on my bed in the lamplight and talked about nothing that mattered until 3 in the morning. She told me about New York, and London, and Berlin. I told her about the museums I had worked in, and the artifacts I had touched, and the specific satisfaction of understanding beauty by studying it without trying to change it. By the time she left, I understood that she was not just documenting me anymore. She was building something with me. Sienna came to the apartment one afternoon in October while Margot was photographing me reading in the window light. She let herself in with the key I had given her in case of emergencies and found Margot standing 3 feet away from me with a camera and Margot's entire focus on the specific way the afternoon was hitting my profile. Sienna did not say anything. She simply put down her bag and watched. When the shoot ended, Margot lowered the camera and turned to see Sienna standing in the doorway. For 1 second there was the old professional distance in her face, the mode that she used when dealing with clients and complications. Then it dropped. "I came to apologize," Sienna said, formally, in a way that requires you to listen to the whole thing before you respond. "Okay," Margot said. "I was angry with you because I thought you had manipulated my sister," she said. "I thought you had used your position and your authority as a photographer to create a situation where she felt obligated to respond to your attention. I thought this was about power, and I was wrong." She stepped further into the apartment. "I watched you with her just now," she said. "I watched you wait for the real moment instead of directing it. I watched you see her as an actual person instead of as a subject. I watched you respect her autonomy so thoroughly that you were not even touching the situation with anything except attention. And I realized that what I was angry about was not actually that you had manipulated her. I was angry because I recognized myself in what you were doing to her, and I did not like understanding that the people I respect the most are not people who make me feel powerful. They are people who make me feel seen." Margot said nothing. "I'm here to ask if you would consider photographing my commercial properties," Sienna said. "The architectural work, the spaces themselves. Not as a client obligation, but as a real collaboration. And I'm here to tell you that I am sorry for treating you like you were a threat, when actually, you were just a person who loved my sister badly at first, and then well after you were willing to lose something for it." Margot looked at me. "I didn't tell her to say that," I said. "I know you didn't," Margot said. She looked back at Sienna. "I would like to photograph your properties," she said. "And I am also sorry. I should have disclosed the situation sooner. I should have been more careful about the power dynamic," Sienna said. "You were careful. You just weren't careful in the direction I expected. You were careful with her. That was the thing I was not expecting." By November, Margot had created a small darkroom in the studio and was printing contact sheets obsessively. The study was becoming something she could not stop seeing once she had started it. There were thousands of photographs, maybe tens of thousands. Each one was a moment of me being honest, without knowing it was being documented. She had created an entire narrative of falling in love, told through the language of light and shadow, through the specific quality of my expression when I was thinking about nothing at all except her. One evening, she took me to the studio to show me what she had created. The walls were covered. Entire walls, completely covered in photographs of me. The light from the museum. The light from my apartment window. The light on the street walking. The light at markets where I was not thinking about being looked at. Me, rendered in 1,000 different instances of truth. Some so intimate they felt like they should not exist outside of a private space. Some so tender they made me want to hide. I stood in the center of the studio and turned slowly, and with every turn I saw myself through her eyes, not as someone performing beauty or competence, or the version of myself that was acceptable in public, just as someone existing, someone real, someone worth looking at for this long. "I didn't think it would be like this," she said quietly. "Like what?" "Like falling in love with someone and then getting to spend 3 months documenting every version of that falling. Like having material proof of the progression from attraction to devotion." I was looking at the photographs. In the early ones from that first week, there was a quality of hunger in her attention. By the middle ones, by October, the hunger had transformed into something else, not less intense but more patient. By the most recent ones, from the past 2 weeks, the gaze had become almost reverent, like she was documenting something sacred. "These are too much," I said. "Too much? For one person to have to absorb. Looking at myself through your eyes is like looking at a version of myself I don't recognize. I recognize the face and the body, but I don't recognize the depth that your camera keeps finding. I don't recognize myself as someone worth this much attention." She came to stand beside me. "That's the version that exists," she said. "That's the you that I see. I wanted you to be able to see it too. I wanted you to understand that the way I look at you is not invention. It's documentation of something that's already there. I turned to face her. What happens with all of this? I asked. With the photographs? With the study? With the documentation of me? With the evidence that you have fallen in love with me and decided to make that visible? She looked at the walls, at the thousands of images surrounding us like they were building something in the space between us. I am going to develop a show, she said. It will be at a gallery in the Arts District. It will show the full arc of it, the first moment I saw you, the moment I understood what I was seeing, all the moments after. It will be a chronicle of falling in love, photographed without consent in the moment but with full consent now. That's going to be very visible, I said. It is, she said. It's going to make the situation with your sister public. It's going to make what I feel about you undeniable. It's going to put you in a position where every person who sees the show will understand that you are the subject of an obsession. That sounds complicated, I said. It is, she said. I wanted to ask if you wanted me to do it before I did it. I wanted to make sure you were comfortable with existing as the central subject of my work. I looked at all the photographs of myself surrounding us. In some, I was laughing at something that had nothing to do with her. In some, I was thinking about her completely. In all of them, there was the evidence of being seen, being chosen, being loved thoroughly. When is the show? I asked. 4 months from now. Gallery opens in February. 2 weeks run. I'm going to say yes, I said. And I want to tell you why, but I want you to understand that it's not because I'm comfortable with it. I'm saying yes because I want the world to see what you see. I want people to understand that falling in love is not about being perfect. It's about being seen by someone and deciding that the seeing is enough. I want your obsession to be my obsession with how you see me. She kissed me. It was not the careful kiss from outside my apartment. It was the kiss of someone who had spent 3 months looking at someone and had finally gotten permission to stop looking and start touching. When she pulled back, I said, I want to be completely honest with you about something. Okay, she said. I'm scared, I said, of the show, of being that visible, of existing in the world as the subject of your documentation. But I'm more scared of not doing it, of living a safe version of this that doesn't require anything from me, except that I already love you. She held my face in her hands. Then we'll be scared together, she said. December was negotiation with Sienna, who was processing complicated feelings about the entire situation. The architectural photography project was going well. Margot was finding light in buildings that Sienna had thought were just spaces, and the combination of their work was creating something genuinely beautiful. But the idea of a show about me, of Margot's obsession with me being displayed publicly, required acceptance of a different kind. Sienna called me the day after Margot showed me the walls. If you do this show, she said, you're going to be the most visible you've ever been in your life, not as a curator or a professional. As someone's romantic interest, people will define you by that relationship and that documentation for years. They'll see you and think of this moment, this choice, this visibility. I know, I said. Are you ready for that? No, I said. But I'm going to do it anyway, because standing next to that feeling is more important than protecting myself from it. She was quiet for a long time on the other end of the line. Then she said, I'm going to come to the opening, and I'm going to bring my partner, and we're going to stand in front of those photographs of you and understand what it means that my photographer fell in love with my sister while she was photographing me professionally. And I'm going to be proud of you for being brave enough to let yourself be seen that completely. I asked her if she had come to terms with it all, with Margot and me, with the fact that her photographer and her sister had found each other in a space of professional ambiguity. She said, I came to terms with it the moment I watched Margot wait for the real moment instead of directing it. I came to terms with it when I understood that she was not using you. She was witnessing you. And in this world, that kind of witnessing is rare enough to be worth protecting, even when it makes my life more complicated. In January, Margot began the brutal process of editing the study down from tens of thousands to the final selection for the show. It was agonizing work for her choosing which moments would be public and which would remain private. She would spend entire days in the darkroom, looking at contact sheets, marking photographs with tiny notations that only she understood. She was making decisions about what version of falling in love the world got to see. Some photographs she rejected because they were too intimate. Some she rejected because they were too ordinary. Some she rejected because they were too perfect, too composed, too final. The ones she kept were the ones that showed the process, the moment where attraction was becoming devotion, the second where uncertainty was transforming into certainty, the instant where love became undeniable. She photographed me, looking at the photographs, looking at myself through her eyes, and added those images to the collection. A meta layer of me understanding myself through her documentation. The final photographs of the study were not of me at all, but of me in the act of being changed by seeing myself the way she saw me. We would sit in the darkroom at night, surrounded by contact sheets, and she would talk about each choice. Why this photograph made it, and why that one didn't. How the progression needed to feel like a conversation, not a declaration. How every photograph she kept had to earn its place in the story she was telling. By late January, we had narrowed it down to 217 photographs, from tens of thousands to a single narrative, a curated chronicle of 3 months that would tell anyone who looked at it exactly how she had fallen in love. The night before the show opened, we stood in the gallery space while the final installations were being completed. The photograph of me from that first shoot at the studio, the one where I was thinking about her, thinking about me, was blown up to 8 feet tall and positioned at the entrance. Beneath it was a single line printed in careful, minimal text, "The moment I understood." The other photographs spiraled out from there. Chronologically, a visual journey through 3 months of being seen with complete and undeniable attention. By the time viewers reached the end of the gallery, they would have watched Margot fall in love across an entire wall of images. "Is this too much?" she asked again. "No," I said. "It's exactly enough. It's exactly the right amount of honesty." She took my hand. "Tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow this exists in the world." "Tomorrow," I agreed. The opening was the following evening. Margot had invited everyone, her fellow photographers, curators, the artistic community that had followed her work over the years. She had invited Sienna and Sienna's partner. She had invited my family. She had created an entire event around the documentation of her falling in love with someone, and now everyone was about to show up and understand what that meant. The anticipation had been building all day. Margot was nervous in a way I had never seen her nervous. Her hands shook slightly as she checked the lighting one final time. She had printed a statement to accompany the show, a brief essay about the ethics of photographing someone without their knowledge and the redemption possible through full disclosure and consent afterward. The statement was controversial, she knew. Some would call her work predatory. Others would call it brave. I was terrified. I came to the gallery early, before anyone else arrived, and Margot was standing in front of the 8-foot photograph of me, looking at her through a camera. She was completely still, just looking at it, and I could see the specific quality of vulnerability on her face. This moment was real now. Everything she had felt and documented was about to become public knowledge. "Talk to me," she said without turning around. "I'm scared that people are going to see this as an invasion," I said. "Of my privacy, of my autonomy. That they're going to think you took something from me without permission." "They might," she said. "Some people will. Some people will see it as obsessive or possessive or a violation. That's fair. What I did photographing you without your knowledge, documenting your private moments, was a violation of your privacy in the moment. I knew that then. I chose to do it anyway. And I'm not going to apologize for the choice because it created something true. But I am going to accept that the violation is real and that some people will see it that way." "And you're okay with that interpretation?" "No," she said. "But I'm okay with the risk of it, because I'm more afraid of not doing this, of keeping the way I see you private, of pretending that love is not worth making visible. I'd rather risk judgment than risk never showing anyone what it looks like to fall in love with someone so completely that documentation becomes a form of devotion." She turned to face me. "And I'm asking you to be okay with it too. Not because it's comfortable, but because standing in front of these photographs together means we're both taking the risk. We're both making ourselves visible, We're both choosing this. I'm okay with it, I said. I'm terrified, but I'm okay with it. The first people to arrive were Sienna and her partner. They stood in front of the opening photograph for a long time, without saying anything. Then they moved through the gallery methodically, looking at each image, understanding the progression. I watched my sister move from defensive to understanding, to something that looked almost like pride. By the time they reached the end, Sienna was crying in the way that Sienna rarely cried, not dramatically, just with the weight of understanding that her sister was loved this thoroughly, and this publicly. She found me in the crowd. She really loves you, Sienna said. She does, I said. This is going to change things, Sienna said. I know, I said. For her professionally too, Sienna said. People are going to know her as the photographer who fell in love with someone and documented it extensively. That's her legacy now. Yes, I said. She's okay with that? I turned to look at Margot, who was across the gallery talking to a group of photographers, explaining the process, the choice, the ethics of documenting love without consent in the moment but with full consent now. She was standing in the light, like someone who had made a decision and had decided to live fully inside the consequences of it. Yes, I said. She's okay with it. By the end of the opening, over 200 people had come through the gallery. The show was being written about by mourning the photographer who took the biggest risk and made it visible, the woman who agreed to become a subject in perpetuity, the love that refused to remain private. It was complicated coverage. It was fascinated coverage. It was the kind of attention that makes something real in ways that private feelings sometimes cannot. That night, after everyone had left, and the gallery was being closed for the evening, Margot took me to the back room where she had set up the darkroom. It was a small space, intimate, lined with photographs hanging to dry and contact sheets pinned to the walls. Red light filtered through everything, turning her face a shade of crimson that was almost unrecognizable but somehow more honest than daylight. She had printed one more photograph that morning, one that she had not included in the show. It was sealed in a black envelope, and she held it without opening it yet. "This one is for us," she said. "This is the one I'm not sharing." I looked at the sealed envelope. "What is it?" I asked. Me in the gallery, looking at the photograph of myself looking at her. You understanding yourself through my eyes. The final layer of the documentation, not you being seen, but you learning to see yourself the way I see you. She opened the envelope slowly and showed me the photograph. It was extraordinary. It was me at the center of the gallery, surrounded by images of myself, with an expression on my face that could only be described as revelation. I was understanding something in that moment, accepting something, surrendering to something. I looked at the photograph of myself understanding. "I'm still trying to understand what it means to be looked at this thoroughly," I said. "To have someone love you by documenting your realness instead of constructing your beauty." She stepped closer. "It means you get to be yourself completely," she said. "It means you don't have to perform. It means the person who loves you has decided that the unfiltered version is worth more than any constructed version could ever be." She kissed me, not with the careful restraint of the beginning or the urgency of the middle, but with the complete certainty of someone who had spent months looking at someone and had finally decided that the looking was not enough. Her hands moved to my waist. My hands found the fabric of her shirt. We were alone in the darkroom, surrounded by photographs, and the specificity of it, the privacy of it, the reality of it, the fact that no camera was present to make it public made it matter in a way that public love sometimes cannot. She pulled back after a long moment and rested her forehead against mine. "I want to spend years learning to see you," she said. "Not through a camera, just living, just being present to you, the way I've been documenting you. I want the study to be over, and the actual relationship to begin." "The study is over," I said. "Good," she said. "Because I'm tired of looking. I want to start touching." Over the following months, we built something that was not the study, and not the performance, and not the documentation. It was the actual thing, messy and complicated, and occasionally difficult, and absolutely real. There were arguments about small things that mattered more because they were not about the big thing. There were moments of complete understanding and moments of baffling confusion. There was the slow, real work of building a life with someone. Sienna eventually became one of our closest friends and collaborators, and the architectural photography project expanded into something genuinely innovative that would eventually be featured in major design publications. Margot stopped taking on commercial clients entirely and began a new body of work that was entirely about interior spaces, not portraits, but the spaces where people lived, the light where people existed, the way architecture could hold human experience and memory. She photographed homes and offices and studios and galleries. She photographed the light in each space at different times of day. She was building a visual essay about how environment shapes experience, about how the spaces we inhabit become part of who we are. This work was personal in a different way than the study had been. It was about the world rather than about me, which felt like a necessary correction. She never photographed me again after the opening. I asked her why once, 6 months later, when we were lying in bed on a Sunday morning and the light was doing something beautiful across her face. She said, "I've got all the photographs I need. Now I just want to live with you, without the camera between us." 1 year after the gallery opening, Margot and I got married in a small ceremony in the warehouse district, in a space that was not the studio but that had the same quality of light. Sienna was there. Both of our families were there. Margot's closest collaborators and colleagues came. My museum director came. We exchanged vows that had nothing to do with photography and everything to do with the decision to stop documenting and start living, to choose presence over documentation, reality over representation. I told her that being seen by her had changed the way I saw myself, that the study had given me permission to exist without constantly performing existence, that I would spend the rest of my life learning what it meant to be loved this completely, this honestly, this thoroughly. She told me that I had given her permission to stop hiding behind the camera and to actually participate in life instead of just recording it. That loving me had taught her that presence was a form of devotion that documentation could never equal, that she would spend every day for the rest of her life trying to see me as completely awake and aware as she had in those 3 months of the study, but this time with the full participation of a shared life. The photographer was a friend of Margot's who had nothing to do with the way she saw me, which was the point. This was not documentation. This was witness. This was someone else acknowledging that two people had decided to build something together without needing to make it permanent in images. After the ceremony, as we were leaving the space, someone called Margot's name. She turned, and a photographer from one of the arts publications was asking if they could take a photograph of the two of us together for coverage of the show's anniversary retrospective. Margot looked at me. I nodded. She turned back to the photographer. "One," she said. "One photograph. And then we're done." They took the photograph, Margot and me, turning toward each other, the warehouse light catching us both. It was not composed. It was not carefully arranged. It was just two people who had decided that being seen together was enough, and being seen by each other was everything. When the photograph was published 6 months later, it ran with a retrospective of the original show and a long interview with Margot about the evolution of her work over the previous 18 months. The article described her as the photographer who had risked everything on visibility and had found that visibility was actually freedom. It described me as the woman who had understood that being loved by someone who saw you completely was worth the cost of being public. The article also featured the final photograph of the study, the one she had printed for us, the meta-image of me understanding myself through her eyes. She had decided to release it publicly after all, but only after we were married. Only after the documentation and the actual relationship had become distinct enough that she could share it without it being an invasion. I do not know if the article's assessment was accurate. What I know is that Margot stopped looking at me through a camera and started looking at me the way you look at someone you have chosen to spend your life with. I know that the documentation ended and the actual living began. I know that the show became something other than what she intended. It became evidence that obsession could transform into devotion, that documentation could become love, that being seen thoroughly and completely could be the most intimate act of all. We have been together for 2 years and 4 months. Margot still takes photographs. She photographs light and space and architecture and the specific quality of buildings at different times of day. She photographs the way light moves through our apartment in the morning, slanting across the wooden floor in patterns that change with the seasons. She photographs the city at dusk, that magical hour when the light turns golden and everything looks forgivable. She is planning a new exhibition about interior spaces, about the way people inhabit the buildings they live in, about how light can transform a home into something sacred. But she does not photograph me. She looks at me, though. Every day, she looks at me with the full force of her attention, with the complete commitment of her eye, with the knowledge that seeing something completely is the closest humans get to loving something immortally. And I have learned to receive that, looking without the camera, without the documentation, without the need to make it permanent in any way except the way that living together makes it permanent. I no longer feel like I'm being studied. I feel like I'm being lived with. I feel like someone chose me and decided that the choice was enough, that the seeing did not need to be documented because the living would be the documentation. And that, as it turns out, is the thing I was actually waiting for all along. The thing that cannot be photographed but can be felt every single day, the knowledge that someone has chosen to see me, really see me, and has decided that the seeing is enough to build a life on. Not the seeing that requires validation or exhibition. Just the seeing that says, I know you, I choose you, I will keep choosing you, every single day, I will keep looking.